Good afternoon and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns Hour here on YouTube. It is a interesting and I would almost say glorious July 1st, 2019. I hope everybody had a great weekend, especially after yesterday's pleasant surprise. And I would say with no amount of reservation when I saw the headline on Zero Hedge yesterday that Donald Trump was crossing the DMZ. I had to say, I was actually taken aback. I didn't think it was going to happen. I didn't think he was going to do it. Wasn't having much hope at all that anything other than what we saw at the G20 was all we were going to see for the weekend. And even that was pretty good. It wasn't great, but it was better than nothing. So all in all, last week was a pretty good week for peaceniks. So before we get too far down the line, I'm going to wait for a couple of people to get into the stream before we get started. This will be having to suffice for tonight's live stream because I will not be here tonight. My wife and daughter have been up in Ohio visiting her parents for about a week, and they're on their way home, and they'll be back about 7 o'clock. And sorry, they take precedence over you guys. It's just the way it is. So I'll do this now for as long as you want me to, but you know, think of it this way. This is going to be my live stream for the day. We'll just go with it from there. All right. So as always, you can find me over at tomluongo.me, where I have an article up there right now of title, "Only Trump Could Go to North Korea," echoing the idea that only Nixon could go to China. And you can also find me over at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns, where you can sign up for the investment newsletter, which ties up all the geopolitics and the cryptos and gold and monetary theory all into a kind of neat little package for the retail investor to make sense of what's going on, to be able to go to their financial professional and make some reasonable, have some reasonable pushback against conventional thinking, because conventional thinking will not get you through what we're going to go through over the course of the next year to 5 years. So over the course of the next 5 years or so. So let's get right down to brass tacks. Donald Trump, Korea, went to the DMZ and without any fanfare whatsoever, just walked across. It was almost surreal, to be honest with you, to see that happen, come together as quickly as it did. Normally, these things are all full of negotiations and pomp and circumstance and everything else, and weeks worth of security detail and the whole 9 yards. And Trump just said, nope, we're going to North Korea. We're leaving the G20. We're going to North Korea. We're going to go visit him. I have to tell you, you know, before we get too far down the line here, because I've got a lot of thoughts about what this means, where we're going from here and all of that stuff, which is what we're actually going to talk about today. But I want to start with the unbridled happiness I felt the moment I watched the video, because I didn't see it live. I wish I had. This is the kind of thing that has to happen. Diplomacy is not weakness. Diplomacy is not legitimization. Diplomacy is talking to people. And the people who are the architects of our foreign policy, and this goes well beyond Trump, this goes well beyond his advisors, this goes back 40, 50, 60 years now, have built this rhetorical wall around our enemies, that we shouldn't talk to the bad people, because why would you legitimize them? This is nonsense. It doesn't matter who somebody is. Another person is the head of state. The only way you're going to figure out what they want and why they act the way they do is if you sit down and talk with them. If you just threaten them, it's only going to convince them that you're not interested in any kind of reasonable conversation and any kind of reasonable relationship, even if that relationship is to ignore each other. But every once in a while, the diplomats need to get together and talk to each other. The Russians are very good at this. I watch what Sergei Lavrov and his staff do on a regular basis. And the contrast between them and Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, and the rest of them is stark. And say what you want about John Kerry as to whether or not he was a good Secretary of State, whether he's a traitor, whether he's this, whether he's that, any of those things. None of that stuff matters. At least Kerry talked to people. At least Kerry had Javad Zarif on a speed dial, who was the Iranian foreign minister, so that when a boat of ours wandered into Iranian waters, most likely by mistake, Kerry was able to call up Zarif, get him on the phone, broker a deal, and get those guys home in no time flat. Less than 24 hours. The incident was over. Not a big deal. Neocons and Ran hawks and Israelis and the Saudis went crazy. The media went nuts. They tried to blow it up into something that it wasn't, because, you know, these things get hits, they make ratings, the whole 9 yards, they sell advertising. But none of it was important. So from that perspective, again, I know John Kerry's biggest fan. Shit, I don't like anything about John Kerry, but I like the fact that he kept the Iranian foreign minister's phone on speed dial. And since that time, since Trump took office, there's been precious little of that. Any communications between us and Iran have to go through back channels, have to go through third parties. Pompeo doesn't talk to Zarif at all. Tillerson didn't talk to him at all. And this is just utter nonsense. So Trump doing this was great. It was unbridled joy at seeing this happen. What does it mean? Will he be able to do much to follow through? What actually was talked about? What was discussed? Yada yada yada. All that stuff is irrelevant in the short term, in the aftermath. Making the first step and going to Kim was important. It's important optically. It's important in every way. So much of the political rhetoric that happens here in the United States is about not legitimizing, as I said, not legitimizing our quote-unquote enemies. We don't go and talk to them. We can't talk to them. They're bad people. They have to come to us if they're going to talk at all. And then it has to be on our terms. And it can only be after we've decided that it's okay. And all of these things, all of this stuff is insane. Okay? It doesn't work like that. You have a tiff with somebody and you need to have a relationship with them in some way. You eventually sit down and talk to each other on neutral terms. You set up a third party, you do something, and you talk to each other. You have a tiff with a person at work, your wife, or your spouse, or just a good friend. At some point, you have to sit down and have the conversation. It's an uncomfortable conversation, but you have to have it. Period. Or you have to completely ignore each other in every way. And that's not what we do. We say you can't talk to us, and we're going to dictate who you can talk to, who you can trade with, what you can do, and all of and everything else. It's not even like it's detente, the two are on opposite sides of the world and we don't speak to each other. That's one thing. We do take it one step further. Not only do we say there should be no diplomacy, but we also are entitled to intervene and tell everybody else what should go on as well. And that's just absolute nonsense. It's absolute craziness. And there's a sense of entitlement in the Washington establishment as to this point of view, that as the imperial nation, that we have the right to arbitrate and set terms in these in ways that are absolutely and utterly insane from any other perspective. And then the media goes out and sells it, and we get gaslit into believing, no, we shouldn't talk to Iran. Iran shouldn't be, North Korea, if they're, until they start, knocking off their bullshit or whatever, we shouldn't do that. I'm like, I was having this conversation with a guy the other night. As a matter of fact, I was having this conversation with two people who were ex-Navy the other night. One of whom was my good friend Larry, and another one is another guy I hang out with once a week at my game club. And I knew Larry wasn't going to make that argument because Larry's even more of a freaking libertarian than I am. But the other guy was like, making these arguments, and I just said, look, that's not the way this works. The situation is far more dangerous than that. There's a lot more going on than meets the eye here. And that's what you've been selling. That's what everybody's selling, both on the left and the right. But it's not real. Moreover, when you backtrack over the course of the last couple of weeks and you look at what's been happening over the last couple of weeks since the run up to the drone getting shot down by Iran, what you notice is that really, and I just published an article over strategic culture, though I wrote it like Wednesday of last week, but it takes them a couple of days to decide when to put my article out. And I wish it actually had come out before Trump went to North Korea, because it would have actually been more relevant, but it is what it is. I won't complain. I can grouse, but I won't complain. They pay on time. They're fantastic. Which is that Trump didn't really have any other moves. He had boxed himself into a corner on Iran. He doesn't really have he still doesn't have any moves on Iran, other than to ignore them at this point, which would be the best thing imaginable. And that's effectively, I think, what China and Russia both told him at the G20 over the weekend. They're like, look, you can continue to sanction Iran all you want, but Xi was not going to back down on buying Iranian oil. They'll probably handle all the transactions through Russian banks. Putin probably told me the exact same thing. We're going to clear all the transactions for Iranian oil, and you can either blow up all their oil tankers and go to war with the world or not. This is exactly what I expected everybody to eventually tell him. And so understand that this was really Trump's only move. In hindsight, now I wish I had actually thought of this, but I wasn't really paying attention to any of this. I was focused on other things. And to my eternal shame, and to say that this makes a lot of sense as the only move Trump could have made, because I've been saying it here on this live stream, I've been saying it in other interviews that I've done, I said so with Jeff Rense last week when I was on with him, I said it on Fault Lines about a week and a half ago, and in other places, that for Trump to solve Iran, he needs to solve North Korea, because the two are inextricably linked at the hip. If North Korea has something like 60 to somewhere around 40 to 60 warheads, and if everybody was really serious about stopping Iran from getting one of them, well, then none of this would be going on. There would be bombs flying. There would be planes in the air. If anybody wanted Iran to have a nuclear weapon, Iran would have a nuclear weapon. The Chinese would have given it to them. The North Koreans would have given it to them. The Russians would have given it to them. So all of this stuff that comes out of primarily Israel and Saudi Arabia, and then their think tanks here in the United States, their neocon think tanks on K Street, this idea that Iran is actively pursuing a nuclear weapon in this way is nonsense, because they're not. Because if they were, they would already have one. Maybe they're pursuing one, but they're not that close. And the North Koreans, and this is how, and if you're worried about the North Koreans giving them one through the back door because Iran has been in many ways financing North Korea's nuclear ambitions, well then the longer you go in which you do not sit down and talk and cut a deal with North Korea on this issue, the closer you get to the worst thing that in your mind that could happen, which is Iran getting a bomb. Seems axiomatic to me that you should be opening up negotiations as quickly as possible and not trying to put them off as long as possible, unless all of the stated reasons for all of this stuff is bullshit. Is the whole nuclear weapons thing just a big canard? I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm not saying that, but everybody knows you really can't use them. We don't use them. Russians don't use them. Chinese don't use them. The Indians don't use them. The Pakistanis don't use them. Everybody knows that these are effectively weapons of such immense destructive power that the potential for anybody to actually lob one at each other is nothing more than insane hyperbole and gaslighting. So now what's the real question? So now let's talk about some of the tactics, what's actually going on here before I go too much further, because this is what I really wanted to talk about, because all of this I covered in my article. So as you all brought up in the comments, John Bolton was in Mongolia. Let's go over the last 10 days. First, Trump insults him in public on Meet the Press. Then he's not present at his side when he goes to North Korea, and he's in Mongolia. Like, if Trump isn't really good at sending a message, and a political optics message, John Bolton is done. Okay. That's it, right? Bolton's done. This is a good thing. This is the kind of thing that has to start happening. Bolton, Pompeo, Haspel, and the rest of them, they all need to go. Now, let's talk about where they came from, because that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It's the 800-pound gorilla in the room that critics of mine like to bring up all the time. Well, Tom's great. He talks about all this stuff, but he never mentions the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is Israel, which is nonsense. I do. I just don't do it all the freaking time. I just don't blame everything in the world on Israel. But in this case, I think we can. And Bolton was obviously appointed to Trump by Sheldon Adelson. In many ways, probably Pompeo as well. Maybe even Haspel. And notice that when they were hired, Trump was at the lowest point of his presidency. Mueller investigation was going on. Democrats we still hadn't dealt with the midterms. He had serious issues within the GOP, yada, yada, yada. All this stuff was going on, right? His only real allies were the neoconservatives and AIPAC. And, his son-in-law and his daughter and all of them, yada, yada, yada. And they're all Israeli firsters at a certain level. But let's not forget something. For all of his cheesiness, for all of his faults, for all of his narcissism, for all the things I've called him out on, I've never once doubted Donald Trump's patriotism. This is a very key point. Trump's not a very complicated guy. And I've always said this. Always. My problem has been with him understanding how you express that patriotism and how that gets twisted into doing something horrible. I also believe that at a fundamental level that Donald Trump has more humanity than all the people advising him. None of them care. They're all freaking soulless assholes. But Trump has to be manipulated by them into reacting to current events, into world events. He has to be shown pictures of dead babies, or pictures of dead ducks, or all of these things. He has to be told the horror story and told in human terms. And once it comes into human terms and the snuffing out of in his terms, beautiful life, they get him to overreact and they get him to act limbically. Trust me, they knew the book on Donald Trump well before he was ever put in office. And go watch him on Twitter. Call him out on Twitter. Somebody important calls him out on Twitter. He doesn't hold back. He always responds because he can't stand being needled that way. Why do you think I needle it? Because he has to be needled. Otherwise, you don't get the response out of him that you want, which is for him to get angry and go do the opposite thing. So, all of that said, Haspel, Pompeo, the rest of them, all of them. Why was Rex Tillerson fired? Because he tried to stop the Saudi Arabians from blockading Qatar. Saudi Arabians no to this. The Israelis probably said no to this as well, because that alliance is far more important than everything else. Because that's the basis for the Kushner-Palestinian deal, about bringing the Arab countries together in Arab NATO. They wanted to get Egypt involved and all of this stuff. And that was what was going on, right? So now, take this one step further. Where are we today? Mueller investigation's gone. William Barr saved Trump's ass. If Will Chamberlain's to be believed, as we talked about a few months ago, or a few back in April. That it was William Barr's opinion that once he became AG, he shut down the Mueller investigation because Mueller couldn't, Mueller, however you say his name, Mueller could not go further on an obstruction charge, on an obstruction of justice charge, based on his interpretation of the statute. Barr shut that interpretation down, said that that interpretation is invalid, and Mueller's entire case at that point fell apart. At which point the Democrats lost their mind. They still have lost their mind. And so look at that. So we're post Mueller, we're post G20, where Trump finally got to sit down with his Chinese, Russian, Japanese, or everybody, his equivalents, saw the lay of the land of what was going on in Europe and how they're fighting amongst themselves. Probably saw Angela Merkel shaking uncontrollably and went, okay, they're done. The Germans are done. There's all this stuff going on. And then, and this is the kicker, I think, he watched the debates He watched the debates. And what did he see at the debates? He saw 19 people who don't have a prayer, 20 people really, because she doesn't have a prayer either, even though I adore her. Ms. Tulsi Gabbard. All of them, not one of them, is capable of beating him in an election. They're so off the freaking charts loony. They're so out of phase with the rest of the country that he's looking at around himself. And I know I've heard multiple rumors that Adelson's on his way out within the White House anyway. Heard that for a while now. Got John Kirikow out there saying that Bolton's replacement is actively being shopped for. So now what? You think Trump has told Adelson, I don't need your money? I just sold out Orlando. 85,000 people or however many were at the freaking kickoff event. Are you kidding me? These aren't 15,000 seat halls. He's bringing in better crowds than the Florida Gators are. I got news for you, dude. He doesn't need Sheldon Adelson's money to win. Not against this bunch of rejects. Who's literally going to run against him? Miss Bipolar herself, Pocahontas. That would be the funniest thing we ever saw. Bernie Sanders. Who in the hell in their right mind, outside of like a disgruntled 25-year-old, is going to vote for Bernie Sanders at the end of the day? Okay, half the crunchies in Gainesville will. So what? They can't turn the election. Pete Buttigieg? Cory Booker? Kamala Harris? Come on, she's so freaking dirty, it's not funny. She won't last 20 minutes. Beto O'Rourke, they're already eating themselves. And I'm telling you, thinking about this morning, I'm watching these people and they're completely and utterly lost. Biden is done. I mean, Biden can't get through an hour without putting both feet in his mouth. He's done. They're going to go down to a Reagan 84 style defeat if they continue on this path and Trump continues to clean up the voter rolls in all of these freaking counties, like Los Angeles County, where 1.5 million votes were taken off the freaking fake votes were taken off the rolls. If you look at the situation, Trump is probably thinking to himself, he does not need AIPAC's money. As things stand right now, he'll eat every one of them for lunch. And all he has to do is reverse course on about everything he's been doing in foreign policy. He can do the math. He's not stupid. He's got Tucker Carlson telling him what's going on. Bolton's in Mongolia. Tucker Carlson's on Air Force One with him. Come on. So he's got a big problem on his hands. Why do you think it was so important for him to get to announce what? That China would buy more agricultural products from us, buy, more soybeans and stuff. It was direct pander to his base where he's feeling the heat. So now is the time to start bringing the foreign policy stuff back in line, to start normalizing some of it, and to start cutting deals and getting what he can. Because if he doesn't, he's going to crash the world economy. And if he crashes the world economy, he's done. And I'm serious. He's got trust me on this one, Arkvold. I've been doing this stuff for a long time now, and people have always told me that I'm nuts. But none of this is going to go anywhere. So I from that perspective alone, I think that there's room to run here, that Trump is feeling a lot more confident in the office now than he did a year ago. And maybe we're starting to see the switch flip, or the flip of the switch, and things will change now that we're actually heavily into the election season. And he's got a lot of work to do to start bringing himself back. Because, yeah, as some of you were saying, like, a Sanders-Gabbard ticket would have every chance of beating Trump. I don't think that would ever happen in a million years. One, There's two things. One, Sanders will never get the Democratic DNC nomination. It will never happen. Tulsi Gabbard, they don't want her anywhere near the podium. They want someone like, dude, I'm telling you, if you're a Democratic, if you're a normal, not crazy Democrat, and you're looking at that field, you're thinking, you know, Hillary's not looking too bad right now. That field is bad. Kamala Harris is going nowhere. No way. So. Oh, look who's in the audience. Dumbass is in the audience. That's good. I like that. That's fun. No, he didn't go there because he was weak. He finally went there because like I said, as I just said, William Justice, who, by the way, hides behind a nom de plume. He went there and he did exactly what he needed to do. And he was in a bad position. Exactly as I said, he was in a bad position not fucking 4 days ago. And it's time to start reeling all of this stuff back in. If you want to read everything as a brilliant 4D chess maneuver, or you just have to wait long enough for him to get what he wants. Nonsense. I think his instincts are good. I think his execution has been terrible. And I will praise him when he does the right thing. And yesterday he did the right thing. Now he still has to follow through. And there's all this smoke now that maybe things are starting to improve. Maybe the political landscape is such that he can actually get done some of the things he wants to get done. We'll see. And if that happens, great. I don't care. Doesn't invalidate anything I've said previously. Not a bit. Not at all. Because there's no plan. See, all of this stuff about Trump about trusting Trump and all this stuff is all about this. It's all about this idea that he's got a plan for everything. He doesn't. He's flying by the seat of his pants. And it's just nonsense to think otherwise. Because there's no evidence of anything otherwise. Oh, he hired all of these neocons to do what? To bring the world to the edge of frickin' world war? And then he was always going to reverse himself in the last 5 minutes? Bull crap. They ran a script that they sold him. He went with it. And then he got to the end and went, that's insane. It's not going to work, and it's going to get me vilified. No, we're not doing that. I mean, that's Occam's razor. That's who he is. There's Amy Goodman's been claiming for months that Hillary was going to jump in and run. I said it 7 months ago. I said that Hillary was behind. Now, I was wrong about this part of it. But I said this right after the election, that once we started seeing things like, you know, the Kamala Harris, Willie Brown thing, and then, you know, Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren's bar application down in Texas and all this stuff, that was all Hillary lobbing grenades, knocking them all down so that she could swoop in later. No, that's all them eating themselves. And I always said that they would eat themselves, and that whoever came out of this thing would come out so unbelievably wounded. It's the same situation as 2016 in reverse. The Democrats were thinking 14 Republicans, 17 Republicans, whatever it is, they would all come out having beat the crap out of each other. None of them would have any credibility with the people whatsoever, and Hillary would be coronated. That was their plan. That's why all of them ran. They were all freaking deep state plants in the first place. Except for Trump. I give Trump a lot of credit for running a great race and everything else, and having the instincts and the political instincts to get it across the line. And then the minute he won, everything went to crap because he was not in control of the process of the transition, the early setting up his administration, or anything else. And of course, he was sandbagged and sabotaged at every turn. But at a certain level, dude, it's still your responsibility. You're still the dude. You wanted the job, you're still the dude, and if you're not doing a good job and you don't have the chops, I'm not going to sit here and make apologies for you. That's not my job. That's his press secretary's fucking job. And she did a fine job of that for 2.5 years. I mean, it's not that tough. I mean, it's not that tough. So, when you look at what's been going on, and you think, and you go, and you continue to review what we've been talking about for the last 3 weeks, and what we've seen for the last 3 weeks. That drone was in Iranian airspace. Okay? The MEK and the Saudis were likely behind the tanker attacks in the Gulf of Oman. Okay? The Kushner deal is dead. Egypt killed it back in February, but, you know, they're still pushing this dead horse and hoping that people don't notice that it's, you know, it's Weekend at Bernie's, for fuck's sake. Okay? All of this is done. And Trump is looking at all of this going, are you kidding me? This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I want, and this is not what we're going to go with. This is not our foreign policy, and you're not going to rope me into a war I don't want. So he ditched his friggin' entourage, went to the G20, spoke to everybody, and on his way home he said Bolton to Mongolia, and he went and talked to Kim at the DMZ and completely laid waste to everybody. It's a good move. He still has to follow through on this. He still has to fire Bolton. Okay? If you want Iran to back off on any amount of potentially asymmetric warfare around the region, pumping stations, pipelines, a small tanker here, a thing there, in order to raise the price of oil and to raise the insurance rates of oil tankers around the world, got news for you. He's got to continue to do what he's doing. He's also, as I said this morning in that article that was published on Strategic Culture this morning, he has to look the other way and turn a blind eye to Iran smuggling oil and paying for it through Russian Chinese banks. He has to do this. William Justice, you are so full of envy that I've been right about everything. It's so pathetic. It's not funny. It is so pathetic. It is so pathetic. Keep making excuses for him, dude. Like a dog to the vomit. Gotta love it. It's outstanding that you're here. Every day. Every day you show up validates my existence that much more. It's fantastic. Keep coming. Bring it on. I welcome it. Because, look, the Chinese and the Russians told him over the weekend, we're not going to not buy Iranian oil. Multiple reports out that as of right now, the Iranian exports have already hit their nadir and they're starting to rise again. Exactly as I said that they would in multiple articles going back weeks and weeks ago. So, it says this is like thug life. It's fucking crazy. So, at the G20 over the weekend, both Russia and China told them, look, Iran is going to be able to sell their oil. The Russians are going to we'll clear any sales that the EU through Instex won't do. The Instex is the special purpose vehicle that allow them to transact, or allow European companies to transact with Iran outside of the sanctions. And if they don't do it, then everybody else will be able to do it. And Valerian Nabiulina, the head of the Russian Central Bank, has already said, look, there's no less than like 19 countries that have already signed up or are interested in using our SWIFT alternative in order to clear transactions through our banks. So the Russians are going to be the, money laundering center of the world around the sanctions. And Iran is still going to move their oil, because here's the thing. What are you going to do? They already insure their own oil tankers. They already own all their own oil tankers. So all the shipments are already insured in the first freaking place. So now what? Now what? You can't lean on the insurance companies. What are you going to do? You're going to lean on the tin pot refiners? You're going to lean on all of them? Okay. Iran can export as much oil as they want. Will it be easy? No. Will it go back to 2 million barrels a day next week? No. Will it go back up to 600,000 barrels next week? 800,000 barrels next month? 1 million barrels by the end of the year? Yeah. Because once somebody gets away with it, the floodgates will open. Once it becomes obvious that the United States can't, what are they going to do? So if the shipments are getting paid for, the only recourse then is to seize the Iranian oil tankers and say, you can't ship oil to people, which that's an act of war. And that's not going to happen. And Trump is not that stupid. That would send the freaking price of oil to $200 overnight. It's just dumb. It's just dumb. The envy is just so thick. It's awesome. Okay, Arkvol says exactly that China and Russia laid it out for him in no uncertain terms, and it's the best play. Is that the U.S. is just, it's not just outmatched militarily in the economy. I think you're overstating it in some ways. Look, the Western financial system is very much a paper dragon, paper tiger. Rescue Steve asked me, why did Trump hire Bolton in the first place? Because Sheldon Adelson told him to. That's why. And at the time, this is my thesis earlier in the talk. At the time, Trump was worried that he wasn't going to have enough money to run for re-election. And he needed the donor network that Adelson brings within the Republican Party. And so that's why the insane support of Israel. And that may wind up being a liability for him. And if he's not careful, I don't think that we're going to see an unraveling of the pro-Israeli policy position of the Trump administration or anything, but I do see that it's going to back off a little bit. You got to remember also that Bibi Netanyahu is in some political trouble. And I was talking with somebody this morning. It was, what did we see over the weekend? That Ehud Barak might get back into the swing, and that they're starting to trial balloon major Israeli political figures getting back into the seat between now and the elections in the fall. I'm going to talk to Halsey about this tomorrow night and ask him what he thinks is going on. Because here's the gig. I mean, Netanyahu goes, and there's a real change on the Israeli left. 90% of what we're dealing with now goes away. So, but again, as early as January, Tenjin brings up, he absolutely needs to start subtracting the neocons from his administration. He's been adding them as recently as January with Elliot Abrams. You're right, January. In January, the Mueller investigation was still real. Everything changed the day the Mueller investigation was shut down. The tenor of the administration started to change. Which is good. And, that meant also that him ratcheting up the pressure on all of these other people in order to try and get this quote unquote deal of the century through, which is already dead. It was supposed to be roll out in April, and then it slipped to May, then it slipped to the end of Ramadan. Now it's the end of the year. They had a big investor conference over the weekend or recently in Bahrain to try and sell this thing. And that didn't fly. The only people who were for it were the people who put it together in the first place, the Americans, the Israelis, and the Saudis. Who could replace Netanyahu as prime minister? Well, if they're talking about Ehud Barak, he could. But that's the fundamental point. Like in Russia with Putin and like with Merkel in Germany, there's nobody standing behind Netanyahu, which is why he does the crazy shit that he does. Samedja says both Bibi and Erdogan in political trouble at the same time is interesting. What either will do to hold on to power, though, is frightening. Absolutely. Why do you think the Israelis are now bombing Syrian civilians? You think Trump's happy about that? Do you? Really? Will anything meaningful come out of Mueller's testifying before Congress? No. Look, Robert Mueller is not going to tarnish what's left of his reputation falling on his sword for the Democrats. Rescue Steve says, if DNC frontrunners continue to implode, and Turkey escalates tensions, could Tulsi percolate to the top and challenge Trump on foreign policy? Not if the DNC has anything to say about it. I mean, I would love to see. I haven't seen any polls yet after the debates. I haven't looked, but I figure in about a week or two we'll know whether or not she's gotten a significant amount of a bump, and whether or not she's gotten enough donors to get her to qualify for the third debate. I love Tulsi Gabbard. I think she's great, but I think she's also a little young. Okay. And yeah, as Tenjin said, I don't think the DNC lets Tulsi through, full stop. So here's the gig. This is the real. This is what you guys have to. This is the odds-on bet at this point, and it'll probably stay this way going forward. Trump is going to win re-election. He may win different seats or different states. He may not win Wisconsin this time, but he may win something else. Okay, he may win North Carolina, for example. All right. But if he wins re-election, watch for him in the second half of his second term. Watch for him to go after people like Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard would be a perfect pick in his cabinet. In a good post, but not a crappy one. Not an obvious, we're stashing you over here because we're scared of you post, but in a real post. VA administrator, something real. Get her some real experience at that level, other than just as a rep from Hawaii. Tell her flat out, go for it in 2024. Okay? I fully expect if Trump wins with a comfortable margin, he will bring some principal Democrats in specific roles that will do some very good, who will be excellent at certain work. You got to remember, it's in certain positions. I think that's a very strong move on his part. It's hard. Arkvall, I get it. It's hard, but at this point, looking at these people, there's just not one of them in the bunch who can. Honestly, think about the debates, and then think about every one of those people other than Tulsi Gabbard, and tell me that Donald Trump wouldn't eat them alive. Too early to tell, Jonathan. I can't answer questions like that. You always ask questions like that, and you want me to predict what's going to happen that way. I can't predict that right now. Can't predict what Congress is going to look like. If Trump wins in a walk, they'll lose the House. The Democrats will lose the House, and they'll lose the Senate as well. That should be obvious. Here's something else to think about. Last couple of things before I go for the day. Couple other things to think about. One, Cenk Uygur, Zach Exley, Soros thought they won a major victory by getting AOC, Ilhan Omar, and the rest of them elected as the hardcore, ultra-progressive actor studio class to push the Democrats to the far left and get and try and take over the party. And what have they done? They thought they won a major victory. All they've done is turned the DNC and the Democrat and all of them into cartoons. These people are like 6 weeks away from 6 to 8 weeks away from openly endorsing pedophilia. Okay? That's where they're going. That's where they're headed with this shit. I'm dead serious. And that's what I'm like, that's why I'm projecting this out. I'm not talking about today. I'm talking about, think about where they are and think about where they're going to be in 6 months after beating the crap out of each other. Think about where we're going to be at the end of the year. Okay? Excuse me. We go that route with these guys, which is what the Justice Democrats are pushing them towards. They're pushing them towards all of these extreme rhetorical positions. All they're going to do is destroy the DNC from within. And these guys, and you have to remember something, that these guys don't think that they actually think that winning the DNC is the prize, and then they can take that over and then use that to go on their big social justice rant to take on the evil Trump or take on whatever comes after Trump. Because I think they're already thinking in terms of 2024. I don't think they're even considering 2020 at this point. They're thinking about getting another 20 like AOC into Congress and then pulling the party even farther and farther into Looneyvilles. which is fine. I mean, if they want to govern from the left of Portland, Oregon, they're more than welcome to. It's not going to happen. No one's going to let them. Okay? They're going to put them all in a freaking room with some crayons. And here you go. You can draw. Here, take your medication. It's okay. No, okay. Let me see your tongue. Yeah. Okay. Good. You took your medication. Good. Here's your crayons. You can go and watch. And you can go and watch Judge Judy now. That's what we're dealing with. That's where they are. So, against that, Trump has got no worries whatsoever. And, you know, I'm not crazy about Trump at this point, but I'm happier today than I was 2 days ago. Let's see where he is. Let's see where he is in 6 weeks. When he does good, hey, attaboy. When he does bad, motherfucker. It's not that hard. The only difference between politicians and children is the same thing with is that as opposed to ignoring bad behavior with children and only praising the behavior you want to see and ignoring the behavior you don't, with politicians you lambaste them because they're all friggin' narcissists who only understand it when you walk away from them and when you hate them because all they care about is what you think. I don't care one whit about abusing politicians. I don't give a shit. They're politicians. They work for me. My child? No, my child doesn't deserve abuse for, you know, breaking a glass, right? You know, for making a child's like mistake. El Vaquero says, did you see Hank Johnson, Democrat from Georgia, was talking about putting 30 midgets against a giant in a cage match on the House floor? Yeah, that's the kind of thing the DNC primaries are going to be like. The socialism angle is what I'm thinking will challenge Trump. Job numbers are a problem and economic considerations don't help. The socialism angle is not going to help very much at all. At this point, I saw something over the weekend that amongst millennials, what's the word I'm looking for? Acceptance of extreme positions on trans and LGBT stuff is peaked and is starting to drop. And if they lose the millennials, they're done. The only thing that can take Trump out of 2020 is the economy. Whether or not the recession will start within 6 months, like the bond market is indicating, is the key. Rescue Steve, there's an issue here, which is that, yeah, I mean, look, we're already dealing with a potential global recession as it is. Part of that is Trump's own doing. I've wrote about this for a long time. I've wrote about this extensively. Part of the reason why I'm so angry with Trump is that he's too freaking thick to see that his own economic and foreign policy are actually creating the very problems that he's trying to avoid and now blaming the Fed about. Well, he shouldn't be blaming the Fed. He should be blaming himself. How about spending, you know, $500 billion less, Don? That would be a good start. If you want to see the trade balance with China improve, try spending $500 billion less and you'll watch the trade balance improve tomorrow. Because where do you think those dollars are spent? Those dollars are spent on new iPhones and new iPads and cheap crap from China to fill offices and all of that shit. That's what we spend it on. Got news for you. That's where it goes. So this stuff's not that difficult. Moreover, once he's done if he's truly changing foreign policy and he's done shifting gears here, okay, and he backs off on the trade war with China, which he needs to do, he backs off on Iran and lets them friggin' export some oil, actually opens up real negotiations with the Russians on the INF treaty and some other things, does some real good work, gets North Korea to gets Kim to come to the White House, and they sit and they sign something, even if it's just an MOU, even if it's just a letter of intent, I don't care. Something, anything. Get John Bolton out of the White House. Start purging the cabinet of the neocons. He does all this in the next 3 to 6 months. That will all the focus will shift off of him and back to Europe, where October is looking like a fucking barn burning for the Europeans. They can't figure out who's going to replace Jean-Claude Juncker. They went 14 and a half hours yesterday. They couldn't come up with an answer. You've got German elections. You've got Brexit on the table. They haven't even sat the new European Commission. They're not going to be sat until after the Brexit extension is over anyway. So either Boris Johnson or whoever's going to be PM has got to figure out a way to kick that can down the road another 3 months. And what if that doesn't happen? You've got Italian budget talks. You've got all sorts of crap happening. You've got Mario Draghi leaving the ECB and somebody else taking over. And they haven't even decided that it's going to be Jens Wedman, the former head of the Bundesbank. We don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you that freaking Europe is a mess. And if Trump 86s and gets and Trump takes away all of this uncertainty surrounding the dollar and capital is allowed to flow a little bit, got news for you. A lot of that capital is going to continue to flow over here. It's going to send the stock market rising. It's going to continue to send the bond market. The bond market is going to attenuate a little bit. You'll see the yield curve normalize a little bit, but still not enough because we still are dealing with an immense problem. But the real problem is negative interest rates and $13 trillion worth of negative yielding debt in Europe. Shift the attention back away from us, put it back onto Europe, and then watch to see what happens after that. That's what I think is going to happen. And as we get into 2020, we get closer into 2020, it's going to be ugly, but not for the United States because all that capital that's sitting in Europe doesn't know where to go. It's all coming here. We're already starting to see the beginnings of this, but we have not seen the big spike in the dollar yet. And for Trump, that big spike in the dollar has to hold off until after the election. That's a big task. I don't know that it's going to happen. But a mild appreciation of the dollar over the course of the next 12 months will not be a big deal. The dollar index going from 98 to 140, that would be a big deal. And that would crash the economy. He has gone full bore against China. He can't go any farther. The going full bore against China is the wrong play. The right play is to clean up our act here at home. China's got their own problems. If you turn around and you try and put more tariffs on and you make it worse, got news for you. Any damage you do to the Chinese shadow banking system is not enough. Mike Shedlock had a great article the other day talking about all this stuff and saying, look, yeah, the numbers coming out of China are deteriorating, but they're not deteriorating at a rate that will make a dent in their foreign exchange reserves at all. It's not enough money to matter. It's important in the long run. Yeah, it'll change things. But we're talking 10, 15 years here. We're not talking about at the current rate or even a mild acceleration of the current rate. It's not enough to make a dent in a $5 trillion pile worth of friggin' built up capital. It's $5 trillion, for Christ's sake. The Chinese have got a lot, and they would have to go, yeah, no, not happening. And so I really think it's, yeah, I mean, Arkball puts it in like 5 words. China has time, we don't. That's simple. Well, this has been fun. I'm glad I did this for this long today. But yeah, we're not going to be doing this tonight. All right. One last thing. And a lot of other elements at play here. There's de-dollarization, the economy, gold prices, potential mass distraction events. There's all of this stuff. Oh, man, I cringed when he said that about Drahi, too. Tenjin said, I'm happy with the North Korea initiative, but I cringed hard when he said Drahi should head the Fed. I think the thing is that Trump really does believe that, and remember, everything has to be filtered. Everything he thinks it has to go through that narcissistic filter that everything's about Trump. So he really does think that the Fed's raising interest rates to sabotage the economy that he thinks is so brilliant. That's the way he thinks. It's who he is. He's not that complicated. I mean, he's just not. I wish he was. It would be easier, but he's not. The Fed was raising interest rates because the stock market was in the stock. They were, as always, they were worried about blowing a bubble in the stock market, and they needed to raise interest rates in order to help the pension, in order to bail out the trillions of dollars in arrears that we have in pension fund liabilities in this country. That's why they did it. All right. Let me see. I don't think I've got much else to say about any of this, but I think you guys get it, right? Good to see that we've got 77 people in the thing, and I can actually hold on to most of you. But yeah, I mean, understand that this is good. I mean, an unbridled good here. I'd be happy that if Trump continues to do what he's been doing, okay? But like everything else, trust yet verify. Remain skeptical. Have to. Glenn Horowitz, I'll leave you with the last word. Observing and ridiculing politicians used to be the American spectator sport. It'd be nice to see a return to that because, man alive, they are certainly worthy of ridicule. And hopefully some adult appraisal of their insanity. Well, that's what I try to do. All right, you guys, this has been fun. This has been great, but I'm going to spend some time with my wife and daughter tonight when they get home in a couple of hours, so I'm out. I do have a second episode of the crypto series I'm doing with Crypto Rich. We recorded it last week. I just didn't get it uploaded last night. I meant to. I'm going to upload it tonight after I go to bed because it's, you know, it's big, you know, when I have to upload it. So I'll do it tonight. You'll see that on the channel tomorrow. Good to see everybody here today. As always, we'll be back on Friday night at 8:30. I'm sure I'll be on with Halsey tomorrow night at 10:30. If you don't follow me on Halsey News, we're going to probably talk about the Israeli angle on all this. It should be good. It should be fun. And as always, be well. Keep your stick on the ice.